Mr. Chair, just so you're aware, Member McLean may be running late since she's experiencing internet connectivity issues.
Oh, okay. All right. And we shall proceed, ladies and gentlemen. And Ms. McLean can join us as we continue. All right. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name is John Blatherwick and I'll be chairing this hearing today. With me are my fellow panel members, Stan Wilder, Bonnie Oakes-Charon, Michael Wildman, and Heather McLean. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances. Noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, the recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. We do not have any stat decks, so when your application comes forward, you'll have to issue or deal with a words fail me. The statutory declaration confirmation, an oath, pardon me. In terms of the, regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are all the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for a brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where added clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we will ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address for the record. We may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision, and to all the parties and those who have requested it, a written decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. All decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period, during which the decision can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee. Before we begin, are there any declarations of interest, any of the panel members for this panel or the other two panels being held today? I see none. All right. And we have two sets of minutes to adopt, October 6th and October 20th, 2021. Regarding October the 6th, any amendments needed? Any concerns with the minutes? Minutes are fine. All in favor of adopting the minutes from the 6th of October 2021? Right. And regarding the minutes of October the 20th, 21, any changes needed to be made to these minutes? or are they sufficient as presented? Okay, all in favor of adopting these minutes? Okay, those minutes are adopted. We will now move to the adjournment requests, and we have a number of them today. Second here. The first item that's up for adjournment today are items 3 and 4 regarding 364 Lanark Avenue. And this is requested by the planning department and the agent in order to allow time to revise the site plan and the tree information report to request, or to, pardon me, to address staff's concerns. Planning department like to articulate their
Yes,
request?
good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the panel. So while the Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Department has no concerns with the above noted applications for consent and minor variances as filed, we oppose the approval of the above noted applications as per site plan filed, and an adjournment will allow the applicant to revise the site plan and comply with the provisions for streetscape character analysis. Thank you.
I believe Mr. West.
Yeah, we are in agreement with the adjournment request. We'd like some time to discuss with municipal staff with respect to zoning compliance and the tree information report. So if we could adjourn to the next available meeting, that would be appreciated.
Is that sufficient time, Ms. Wakila, Mr. West, to resolve any issues you may have?
Yes, I have no objections.
All right, any questions from the panel regarding this adjournment request? Given that both parties, both you guys, both staff and the applicant have requested, I think that's fine, and you've indicated that you'll be able to deal with these items on the 8th of December. Okay, all in favor of the adjournment until the 8th of December? Item adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yep. Next item up for adjournment is number 5 agenda. This is 4008 Shirley Avenue, and this was originally a request from the planning department and the agent. I understand the agent has withdrawn their adjournment request. The reason for the adjournment is the tree information report has not been submitted, and to provide for the applicant to provide additional time to confirm, or provide additional time to confirm with the applicant as to the status of trees on the property. Is it Mr. Hamilton that's on this file?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, if you'd like to articulate the department's position, please.
Certainly. Staff had initially requested an adjournment to discuss issues with trees on site. The applicant provided confirmation this morning that trees will not be impacted, but staff are still requesting a 2-week adjournment if possible in order to comprehensively review the plans and submit a report to committee.
So what were you sent today, Mr. Hamilton?
Confirmation that a tree information report would not be required because the trees are not distinctive.
Okay. And you still need it for the 2 weeks.
Correct.
All right. Okay. I believe the agent for this application was Mr.
I'm here,
Spence.
Mr. Chair. Yes, I understand from Mr. Hamilton that he wants to revise the report to withdraw the requirement for a tree report. I was ready to go ahead, but I don't want to make waves, so if you want to defer to the next meeting, I'm good with that.
Is December the 8th an appropriate time? That enough time to deal with this issue and have it resolved before it comes back before us?
I believe so.
Mr. Hamilton?
From a staff perspective, yes.
Okay. All right. With that, any questions from the panel regarding this applicant's adjournment request? All in favor of adjourning this until the 8th of December? All right, your application is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Okay. The next application that is up for adjournment is item 6 on the agenda, 337 Somerset East. And this has also been requested by the planning department and the agent for the applicant because additional variances are required for the proposed carport and deck. Ms. Bakula?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct. Additional variances will be required, and the adjournment is requested based on that. To my understanding, the applicant has already submitted the revised application.
Okay. And I believe Ms. McQuaig is the agent for the applicant.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Mr. Argent Stewart from my office will speak to the adjournment request.
All right. There's
Thanks. Through you, Mr. Chair. So we wanted to request the adjournment to the December the 8th hearing. So we've already discussed this with staff who've indicated that they're supportive of the application. And we've also already received public notice for the December 8th hearing. So there should be room on the agenda. And just so that the committee is aware, the reason for the adjournment is that we originally pre-consulted with staff and zoning plans examiner in May of this year. And so we'd gone back and forth with staff to confirm the set list of variances and submitted our application based on what we'd confirmed with staff. But last week, staff identified that additional variances would be required. So we were able to apply for those variances. And staff have already reviewed the application, as I said, and indicated their support. And I want to note that it's really important for us to stick to that December the 8th hearing date. And we want to recognize the time lost for our client and the money spent by the property owner. So I've covered our reason for adjournment, but the owners, you'll see are also on this call if you have any questions for the owners.
And we've been told by committee staff that there is room on the December 8th hearing to hear this application. So we have a request for adjournment before us from both the planning department and the agents for the applicants. Any questions from members of the panel? All in favor of granting the adjournment until the 8th of December. All right, your application is adjourned until then. Thank you. Next application is on the adjournment list for today is item 7 on the agenda. 1250 in bracket 1252, bracket 1254, bracket 1256 Trenton Avenue. And this is a request by the agent to allow time to come to the solution and or compromise with the planning department. Is the agent there?
This one. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Michael Segreto here.
Your address for the record, please, Mr. Segreto.
30 Concourse Gate, Unit 47.
And so you've requested an adjournment.
There seems to be some issues with respect to one of the trees and the development, and the planning department is opposed to the application. So I need to sine die this file so we can see if we can come up with a new development on this site.
All right, so adjournment sine die, the department is aware of this and in support of an application, an adjournment sine die.
Staff are supportive of an adjournment sine die.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Any questions from the panel regarding this application? All right, Mr. Segreto, all in favor of adjourning the application sine die? Your application is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. The final applications that are on the list of adjournment requests for today are items 9 and 10, 415 and 417, 413, 413. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 addresses on Weedsmere Avenue, the base address being 415 and 417. This is a request by the agent. This is the second adjournment request for time to allow for the discussion of trees in the property with the with the city's forester is the applicant there. Applicant's agent.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, Hill.
Yes, in spite of our due diligence and the long-standing circulation of our documentation to forestry, there still seems to be some misunderstanding or concern. We've made an appointment to work this out, and we're confident that it will be sorted out easily. So we are looking to come back to the next hearing.
So you can have the issues resolved by the December the 8th.
Absolutely.
Mr. Belmar, do we have room on the agenda, because it's beginning to fill up on the 8th of December for this application to come back?
Mr. Chair, we can accommodate this application on December the 8th.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Any questions from the members regarding this application? Okay.
Chair, just Ms. Young, I'd just like to hear from her that she thinks it can be discussed and there's opportunity to resolve it on the same timeline.
Okay, Ms. Young.
Hi there. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think there is time. I think we can resolve it at our meeting tomorrow. But it just takes some discussion. So I think 2 weeks is sufficient.
Okay. You're fine with that, Mr. Wildman? All right. All in favor of adjourning this application until the next hearing on the 8th of December? Okay, the application is adjourned until December the 8th. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bear with me for a second, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the applications up for adjournment. Now we can move on to the remaining items on the agenda. Start with agenda item 1, which is 350 and 360 Catherine Street. It's a minor variance to permit a takeout restaurant to not be completely enclosed within a building and to not be located in a building containing an office or hotel use. It is proposed to construct an enclosed pickup and food delivery operation in the parking lot at 350 Catherine Street. I believe the agent for this applicant is Adam Leal. Is he there? Which one of you is Adam Leal? I can't hear you, sir. We don't have volume. You need to turn your volume on. I can't hear you. Nope.
Adam, it might be your headphones. Maybe take them out.
No.
No, we can't hear you, Adam. Can you guys hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Maybe we should step this down until we get the audio issue straightened out. It's probably best. Let's step this down for a few minutes. We'll deal with item 2 on the agenda next, and you guys get your audio straightened out in a few minutes. Talk or phone the coordinator and arrange for a telephone connection, Mr. Leal. Thanks very much. All right, next item on the agenda is item number 2, 35 Monk Street. And this is minor variances to permit a reduced lot area, reduced rear yard, interior side yard, and front yard setbacks, reduced rear yard area, as well as reduced balcony and canopy projections from the front lot line. It is proposed to demolish the existing detached dwelling and detached garage and construct a new 4-story, 8-unit apartment building on the property. And I believe the agent for this application is Mr. Alain.
Yes, I'm present, Mr. Chair.
All right, before we begin, we'll have to administer the oath.
Thanks.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
Yes, I swear.
All right. Please begin your presentation, and the committee would ask that you deal with the variances in order so that we understand exactly what you're asking for.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I will. I see my presentation is being brought up, so I'll wait for that. And before I go into the variances, I just have a little bit of context. So as noted, my name is Scott Allen. I am a planner at FOTEN, and the Committee of Adjustment application before you is submitted further to an active site plan control application currently proceeding through the City of Ottawa Development Review. Following 2 circulations, the broader project comments have been resolved to an extent that the city staff has advised that a minor variance application can be submitted to review and address the zoning compliance issues. We've reviewed the staff report provided by Mr. Hamilton and are in agreement with the conclusions of his review. I can get the next slide, please. So this is the site context. The property you see is 35 Monk Street in the Capital Ward and the Glebe neighborhood. The parcel has an area of 285 square meters and a lot width of 13.7 meters. As you can see,
and just to stop you for a second, Mr.
Sure.
Allen, the tree in the background is the 70 centimeter sugar maple.
Correct, sir.
Okay. All right, please continue.
Thank you. So as you can see from the panel on the left, that's the existing detached two-story building proposed to be demolished. As you can see from the panel on the right, Monk Street is bound to the north by Thornton Avenue and to the south by Homewood Avenue. The property backs onto Bank Street. Of course, we all know Bank Street is a traditional main street and the primary commercial street in the community. The property is in an evolving area where new development and intensification is becoming more prevalent. You can see this from the adjacent use, which is a mid-rise apartment. I'll be calling that 900 Bank for this presentation, just for simplicity's sake. The lot fabric on Monk Street is consistent with the proposed development. I'm going to touch on this shortly later on. And the existing use, this detached dwelling unit, is presently the only use of this type on this east side of Monk Street currently. Next slide, please. Thank you. So to go through the project proposal briefly, we're proposing 8 units in a 4-story building. A central staircase provides access to all units with 2 units on each floor, including a partially below grade level. Front-facing balconies are provided for each unit aside from ground floor unit 2. A chairlift is proposed for the first floor units, supplying some improved accessibility. With consideration to the location of the proposed development in relation to active and public transportation resources, 0 automobile spaces are proposed and 8 bicycle parking spaces are proposed, which is twice the zoning bylaw requirement and represents a 1-to-1 unit to space ratio. The bike parking is provided below grade internal to the building. A garbage refuse room is also provided internal to the building at the first floor level with an overhead door to facilitate collection. To the rear of the building, you'll see a secondary staircase is proposed, which acts as an emergency exit and also facilitates a rear-facing terrace for the 4th floor level. Next slide, please. The building will be clad with stone masonry, which contributes to the existing and developing streetscape, with dark gray stucco proposed as an accent to the primary facade. The rear staircase will be clad with urban accent panel to improve privacy and mitigate overlook. Generous fenestration is provided on the primary facade, as you can see, and then the windows provide for eyes on the street and passive illumination. Smaller and sparser windows are proposed for the building side and rear walls, with minimal windows on the north elevation where it abuts 900 Bank. Next slide, please. Thank you. So over the last week, FOTEN and the project team have worked with city planning and forestry staff to resolve some concerns related to the quantity and scale of trees proposed. The forester requested a large tree in the rear yard, which we were able to accommodate in the northeast corner of the rear yard. This provides shade as well as a soft visual and sonic barrier to the freezer unit on the abutting Kettleman's property. It also provides some privacy to the abutting 900 Bank development. The landscaping improvement necessitated the moving of the staircase southward to ensure a viable growth area for the tree. We thank city planning and forestry staff for working with us to achieve a desirable resolution on this matter and appreciate their support. 2 large maples are also proposed for the front of the building. This provides privacy to front-facing windows and balconies, provides natural beauty to the streetscape and shade to passersby. Next slide, please. Thanks very much. So just before we get into the variances, this is my last point. So I've shown some comparably scaled buildings on Monk Street, 7 Monk Street, 27 Monk Street, and 13 Monk Street. They show the street's role in transitioning downward from the intensifying Bank Street corridor to the low-rise nature further west of Bank Street. I also wanted to note that a couple of these projects were constructed by the applicant, which I note only to illustrate that the elevations proposed are consistent with the final product following construction and is representative of the plans submitted for approval. Now, if I can go to the next slide, please, I'll go through the variances. So I realize there's a number of variances and I'll try to explain them as clearly as possible and as succinctly as possible, but feel free to stop me. So first off is the lot area. You will see the orange rectangle, the largest one, shows the requirement, and we are the blue rectangle, which is slightly smaller than the requirement. So that's 285.2 meters squared is the proposal relative to 300 meters squared. The next variance is for rear yard area. So you will see again, there are orange squares which attempt to show the rear yard area of consolidated landscaping required, which is required to be 71.3. We're providing about 57.3.
And out of curiosity, Mr. Allen, if that rear yard area was maintained, would that save that 70 centimeter sugar maple?
I don't have that. I don't have that knowledge. My background is not in forestry, so unfortunately, I can't comment on that.
Too bad. Continue.
Thank you. So yes, the rear yard setback, we are proposing 4.23 meters and a 20% landscaped area relative to the requirement for 5.23 meters and a 25% minimum. In terms of yard setbacks, the interior yard setback to the north is required to be 1.5 meters. We are showing 0.6. The front yard setback is 0.72 meters, which is the requirement is 1.5. And then lastly, the balcony and canopy projections, which I'm happy to show on the elevations if required, need to be 1 meter from the lot line, and we are showing them 0.1 meters from the lot line. I'm going to go through, lastly, if I may, just go through some rationale for the variances, just to kind of explain our basis.
I think we'd appreciate this. This is a new build.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as far as the requirements of the intent of the official plan, the property is designated general urban area under Schedule B of the plan, which encourages a range of residential types, including the proposed low-rise building. The proposed development adheres to the official plan's vision of redevelopment and general improvement within the general urban area and reflects the scale and characteristics of the existing community. The proposed variances support the introduction of housing types intended for the subject area while addressing neighboring uses in transition. Concerning the intent of the zoning bylaw, the property is zoned R4UD, which is residential fourth density, subzone UD, which encourages a broad range of housing styles from detached dwellings to apartment buildings, as well as other residential uses to provide an appropriate mix throughout the zone. Low-rise apartments containing 8 units are permitted within the R4UD zone, and the proposed development introduces more housing options in the established neighborhood while ensuring compatibility and complementing. In terms of the variances being minor. I'm going to get into them in a little more detail here. So concerning the reduction in minimum lot area, rear yard setback, and area, these will not have an adverse impact on the character of the street. Adequate outdoor amenity is still provided given the combination of rear yard landscaped area, front-facing balconies, the fourth floor terrace, and then the existence of nearby amenities given the strength of this site's location, including things like the Rideau Canal, Patterson's Creek Park, Lansdowne Park, Browns Inlet Park, Commissioners Park, and so on. The reduced front yard setback adheres to similar setbacks found on Monk Street. The reduced front yard setback works towards improving compatibility with the streetscape. The variances to permit reduced balcony and canopy projection maximums are a result of bringing the building facade closer to Monk Street. The balcony and projection elements address design considerations encouraged in the zoning bylaw to create visual interest in the building facade and articulation along the sidewalk. The proposed development demonstrates adequate access to the rear yard and amenity area along the southern edge of the property through the paved walkway, and this minimum interior side yard is met. Accordingly, the proposed reduced interior side yard to the north is minor, and in particular, the windows have been located mostly along the southern face to mitigate impacts to the northern side yard. And next, I'm just going to take a drink of water, and then I'll get into the desirable attributes of the test.
Just out of curiosity, you've got a 0.6 meter, a proposed 0.6 meter northern side yard. How close is the building immediately to the north to the property line?
I could look at those numbers. It's pretty close. I actually, if the coordinator can go to the final slide, please. And so this doesn't do as great of a job as I had hoped for, but you can see it's a very close wall. And in fact, if you give me a moment, I'll pull up the survey on my computer and see if that setback is dimensioned, because it's off our lot, it might not be clearly identified. And no, it's not dimensioned, so I don't have that at my hand.
So you don't know how far the two buildings would be apart?
It's not clear to me what the setback is on the 900 Bank property. From numerically, in terms of numerically, I don't have that at my fingertips. What I can say is that the separation has been considered in terms of the setback being provided at this time.
Well, if you know the minimum, the 1.5 meter setback is there for a reason. How are you going to maintain this building with only a 0.6 meter side yard or northern interior yard side yard?
The intent of the interior side yard setbacks in a lot of projects we work on is to provide access to the rear yard through a viable aisle, and that's part of the approach we had with this project in ensuring that the southerly interior yard provides appropriate access so that it can reasonably, essentially to shift the footprint so that there's a reasonable access to the rear yard by that interior side yard. This setback is appropriate with consideration to the lot fabric, and some of the existing conditions that you see along Monk Street show similar setbacks on building sides and represent a similar successful separation.
But I asked you a question about maintenance. You've got a 0.6 meter side yard being proposed. How do you get maintenance crews in there to make repairs with that minimal amount of space?
Well, essentially, so the no landscaping is proposed there, and so essentially, if there was an issue where maintenance would be required, it'd be similar to a lot of urban infill projects where there would be negotiation with the adjacent landowner to resolve that.
You don't know how far, what the horizontal separation will be between your proposed building and the one that's already in place. What is that distance?
I believe the architect has her hand raised, so if she could answer that question, she would have had a closer hand on the exact design of the building.
Smith is the architect, I take it?
That's correct.
Yes, I believe Tan can answer that question. He has the drawings.
And who are you, sir?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, my name is Tando. I work for Susan Smith Architect. I would like to answer your question regarding the setback for the neighboring building, which is at A90 Bank Street. That's a 3 meter from the property line to the building. That's the side yard setback for the neighboring building.
Okay, is there a fence along that edge of the property?
So right now we propose that going to be a joint with the neighboring building. So in terms of the maintenance on the landscape, we propose the river rocks. So it's just a hard landscape, which is low maintenance. And in that gap between 2 buildings, that means 3 meters on the neighboring plus 0.6 on our side, which is the gap that's going to be 3.6 meters in total.
And you said you're negotiating with the property owner to the north to arrange an agreement for access in case there's maintenance needed on your proposed building?
Yeah, that I think that's the part of the in terms of the maintenance, yes.
But has that been agreed to?
This would be ongoing through the site plan control process in terms of the DAR, and any site plan approval would be tied to conditions such as this if they were deemed necessary by the city planner.
Okay. All right, anything further, Mr. Allen?
I had a couple more bullets if you'll just let me finish up here, and then I see some hands raised from the committee, Mr. Chair, and I'll be happy to field those comments. So I just wanted to conclude by saying the proposed development would be desirable by offering active frontages close to the street and human scaled massing. It increases housing stock while decreasing vehicle parking stock in a dense urban neighborhood in Ottawa. The proposed development works to increase the stock range of typologies and quality of developed dwelling units in an already desirable area that is well served by walkable recreational, institutional, and commercial uses while being embedded within the core of Ottawa's active transportation network. And that's my statement. So I'm happy to address questions through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Wilder, you had a question or comment?
What would be the impact if you actually went ahead and met the rear yard setback of 5.23, as the chair had inquired himself earlier, versus the 4.23? Would units be lost in terms of a design if you had to, in fact, meet the 5.23 rear yard?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will defer to this in some ways to the architecture team because it is a more of an architecture question. That being said, my understanding, generally speaking, is with the modern iteration of the Ontario Building Code in terms of providing all the necessities that relate to essentially establishing a safe building. The actual play you have in terms of shrinking unit sizes and moving things around becomes quite difficult. But I will pass it to Susan and Tan if they want to speak to what the actual impacts of meeting that setback would be.
I can let Tan elaborate, but we do have a wheelchair a unit in here that requires a bit oversized, and trying to accommodate two bedrooms, it will greatly reduce the viability of the project. Tan, do you want to add something?
Yes. Hi, Madam Chair. Hi, Chair. So we have the discussion with the planner, city planner, for this property. At the beginning, we put the bicycle racks and the garbage room outside, but then they want to incorporate into the building. So we put all the accessory, the storage inside the building. And we already talked with him about this rear yard setback. And what we propose right now that the consult between the planner from the city, from our consultant, and our company at the architect. So I believe that the is certified for the city under the site plan control.
Okay, to the city planner. So the rear yard setback that they're requesting of 4.23, doing the 5.23, the request that's been made through site plan to put, for example, the disposal inside the building and the like, this is the reason that we need the volume, which is going to impact the rear yard. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not certain when the request to locate the waste storage inside the building was made. I believe the applicant is at their third submission, if I'm not mistaken. However, the waste storage is included in the building now at the southern end, so that would give reason to a reduced rear yard setback, in our opinion.
Jeez, there's the compromise. All right. It's unfortunate. I mean, you know, it's the trade-off there. Obviously, if you went with the 5.23, I imagine the existing tree. I mean, you're facing Bank Street, and I'm not really keen on the idea of having a reduced rear yard setback as per se. The tree could have been saved. I don't know. I'm really torn on this one. And likewise, I'll be honest, I'm still, notwithstanding that negotiations are occurring between the abutting property owner regarding variance C, the 1.5 to 0.6. You know, we've dealt with this before, and I've always expressed a concern about the, notwithstanding that you have your you have your 3 feet on the opposite side, but the 0.6, I find that again we're really impacting the long term, and I guess it all comes back to, from the longest time now that I've been on committee, the whole issue of maintenance. But I guess if there will be an agreement supposedly between the two parties regarding variance C, but it's B that really concerns me, that, you know, we could have saved the tree. We could have provided more of a rear yard setback. I mean, we're only talking here, I guess, 3 feet, 1 meter, but you know, it would have made a difference and provided a little more landscaping in the rear yard, notwithstanding you're going to have the rooftop space and the balconies. All right, that's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder. Mr. Wildman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions just on the topic that Mr. Member Wilder finished on. Some feedback from Ms. Young. Would that extra 3 feet have made a difference in preserving that tree, do you think, or would it survive?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the tree in question at the rear of the property is not the large tree that I had raised concerns about. It's a small service berry that's in the back.
Okay.
So yes, I do think that additional space could have saved that tree, but right now, through the negotiations we've made over the past week, they're going to replace that tree with a large growing tree. Okay. The tree in question that I was concerned about is in the side yard, and actually the one with the largest setback, and it's still not enough to retain that tree. I don't think it would have been reasonable to adjust the building enough to retain that one.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot. For Mr. Alain, his presentation referring, if the coordinator could pull up that slide where there was the blue and orange boxes on it.
I believe that's slide 5 or 6 for the coordinator.
Yeah, so when I look at this, it's just the reason I'm picking this one is because you see the existing footprint of the home, I guess, that was is to be demolished. It appears to be almost at that 0.6 line, perhaps a little further away. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Right. So do you have that dimension by chance? Would you have that on a plan?
The difference between the 0.6 and the
Yes.
existing building.
Yes.
It would be on the original survey. I have it up. I'll see if it's clearly dimensioned, just with respect to the committee's time here. It's 0.76 is what the survey says. So
Okay.
you're looking at
So-
16 centimeters different, or
Yeah,
Yeah.
6 inches or so, or yeah, 6 inches or so. Okay. You mentioned at some point during your presentation that side of the street is pretty much, that's it. There's everything else is transitioned, and you said that things were similar. So when we think about the variances that are being requested, like when we look at sort of C through, I guess, F, when you use the term similar, do you have examples of other nearby developments? Because you did have some similar looking developments. And do you have examples of any that would fall into that category of similar, that would reflect what you're looking for variances C, D, E, and F? Is there anything very close to that that's there?
through you, Mr. Chair, if the coordinator doesn't mind going to the previous slide, I believe it is. Thank you. So if you refer to 27 Monk Street, so this is the bottom left corner. We brought this file before the committee mid 2020, and essentially this is I'm not going to say it's the same, because it's not. All files are treated differently, of course, but it occupies a very similar context where it's actually flanking the other side of 900 Bank and deals with similar issues. So I'm going to, it has reduced side yard setbacks. I'm just pulling up the application, and it has reduced balcony setbacks. So similar example, as you can see, in order to deal with the permitted projection bylaw, which wants all balconies and canopies more than 1 meter from the lot line. 7 Monk Street I didn't work on. I can't speak to that with certainty, but as you can see, these balconies they really provide an urban enclosure to the street, and that's through the variances to bring the building closer. If you refer to the building on the other side of 27 Monk Street, it's of a similar frontage, and in fact, I believe of course it's an old building. The balcony projects even further, maybe directly to the lot line. So essentially, these are the kind of elements that we're trying to replicate. And again, this is an example. And again, I didn't work on 7 Monk, but it might be even better in terms of showing how these narrow setbacks are viable and indeed indicative of the kind of work that's being done, particularly on this street.
So just so I'm sure that we're talking the same thing. When we talk about 27 Monk Street and it's the reductions in the setback from the street, are you saying to me that they're very similar, if not, for lack of a better term, almost the same thing as what you're looking for this application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. Susan's firm also worked on 27 Monk Street, so she might be able to speak to that with more detail if desired. But essentially, this is the same kind of aesthetic and desirable characteristics that we're trying to establish here.
Right. Okay. So I'm not sure if the planner has anything to say, but and by planner, I mean the city planner. If he has anything to say to either support what you're saying or refute, but in your analysis of the file, did you take note of the 27 Monk Street relative to what's being proposed here? And do you have any feedback on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did look at the setbacks that are along Monk Street. That did include 27. When I was looking at setbacks, I mostly focused on the two immediately adjacent properties, so it would not have been 27. It is very similar to the setback, the corner side yard setback of 151 Homewood, and slightly more forward than the large development to the north.
So in the ballpark though, is that what we're talking about?
Yes,
we're
close.
not talking meters away, we're talking, you know, small distances.
Correct.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Ms. Smith, you had a further comment?
Just a few points. For 7 Monk, we did receive variances for lot width and lot area and rear yard setback. And similarly for 15 Monk, which was the other two images that that Scott showed. And just further to the comments about the ground floor area being used up, we also have a lot of bicycle parking that is indoors at the ground floor level, which relieves a shed at the back and is very handy for the bicycle parking situation. So that's picking up a lot of the ground floor area as well.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any other comments from the committee regarding this application? Alan, I note that there's no conditions being requested. We have the standard comments and the right-of-way people. Private approach permits required for any new relocated or widened driveways. All right, we've had input from Ms. Young, and that large tree would not have been able to be saved. Ms. Oakstraw, you had a question, comment?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. I thought I heard 3 meters at one point and 3 feet at one point for the northern interior yard setback between the two buildings. I was just wondering if that can be clarified.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I believe this was related to one of Mr. Wilder's points. So we're, of course, in accordance with the Ottawa zoning bylaw, we're dealing strictly in meters. So it's a 0.6 meter setback from our property. And my understanding from Tan, the architect, is that the full distance between walls is 3 meters on the north sideline. So I think that's where it might have come from.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies. I did want to raise the point, though, that that's what exists currently, but there's no guarantee that that's what will happen on that other property in the future. So when asking us to grant the 0.6 meters, I don't find it relevant necessarily what's existing at the moment, because that property owner can make changes to that in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Oakstraw. Ms. Smith, you have a comment?
Just want to say that that's a brand new building. Barely completed now.
Okay. All right. So is there anything further, Mr. Allen, or is that the end of your presentation?
That's essentially the end. I through you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate Ms. Oakstra's comment. When we looked at the variances for this application, we considered them on the merit of the site. Of course, it's our role to consider the context, and we appreciate that contribution. And I just want to note that we still stand by our position that this is among several a minor variance in the context of what we are proposing.
And just for the record, the ownership is now 9516018 Canada Limited.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. Yeah, it's the same individual. It's just in terms of the actual deed, that was needed to be clarified.
So we'll change that on our notice of decision. All right.
Sure.
Any other comments from the Mr. Wildman?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I forgot to ask Mr. Hamilton a quick question. Through the site plan process, do you know, Mr. Hamilton, is there any consideration being given to an easement for maintenance on that side of the building that we've been focusing on the northern side?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any current inclusion, but I know that there is a possibility to discuss that and create conditions as it relates to maintenance.
To the site plan process.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I'd like to reserve on this application. Other members of the committee in agreement? Yeah, okay. All right. We'll thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Allen, and to Ms. Young Forrester and to the two architects for your input. Much appreciated. You're going to reserve this application, and our notice of decision will be released in 10 days. Thank you very much,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Yeah. Can we get back to agenda item number 1, 370 Catherine Street?
Hello, Mr. Chair. Yes, we can.
We have audio, Mr.
Yes.
Lill.
Sorry.
That makes life a lot simpler.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Before we begin, we'll have to issue or you have to swear the oath or solemn declaration. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly
Yes.
All right. If you'd like to make your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we as REEF would like to, the minor variance request is to permit a takeout restaurant not being completely enclosed within a building and not being located in a building containing an office or hotel use on the lot of 350 Catherine Street. Now, our operation is a takeout restaurant that is located in a permanently enabled trailer that will be offering takeout and delivery meals to customers solely through delivery platforms such as Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, DoorDash. By enabling this operation, we'll be creating upwards of 20 jobs that are many are full-time employment and others are part-time. All of which are paid more than the minimum wage and offered benefits. How this operation helps the community is that this form of business, this form of operation of a restaurant provides closer services to communities and is also in line with the 15-minute neighborhood plan of the city. So by targeting specific areas that have a lower density of restaurants, we are able to provide closer services and also reduce the amount of cars that are required by community members, such as by having people able to order food through delivery. There are less cars, such as people actively searching to go to restaurants. We have the same cars, which are Uber drivers and DoorDash drivers that are going to people. We currently have 2 of these operations currently active in Ottawa, one at 2197 Riverside Drive and another at 1546 Scott Street. And they make very good sales. They actively support the community in terms of employment and services and restoration to the community.
And just out of curiosity, Mr. Leal, did you go through the same process with the Committee of Adjustment to get approval for those 2 operations?
No, so the operation there was zoned and verified by the zoning community and permitting committee. The reason why we are applying for a minor variance here is because the subsection section 188-3BC states that a business needs to operate within a building and also a building containing an office or hotel use. Now, this would not change the use of this location. We would be operating our takeout restaurant within a parking lot. This does not change the use of the lot. There would be parking in the lot that would remain there for the community. We are simply leasing 6 parking spaces so we can operate our takeout restaurant in it.
Okay.
This also is in line with the general urban area. This lot falls within the general urban area plan, in which it promotes a different form of business, and also by being closer to communities and supports the nearby community by having closer employment and closer services to people. The property manager would also not only like to have one of these takeout restaurants, but several of them. So that also include, and doing so would also strengthen our REEF's plan to increase and help the local restaurants in the area by taking their brands of food, their food items, and selling them in different areas where they might not normally be able to penetrate or enter into because of brick and mortar locations, investments, employment difficulties, and the like. REEF basically we operate the restaurant and we sell a partner's food items, their menu. We might be able to cater differently and have specific delivery menus for those brands, and the like, and further innovate with that. So local restaurants would have access to different locations. They'd be able to invest in areas without necessarily incurring too many investment costs or having to worry about labor. We all know how difficult it is to find labor these days in the labor market in the restoration industry. REEF would be a very large proponent and supporter of helping local restaurants, local brands, and diversify as well the type of foods that are within each community that we would be operating our takeout restaurants in.
Hi. Could you kindly articulate the 4 tests and how this application meets the requirements?
So could you elaborate on the test?
The intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is met. The intent and purpose of the official plan is met. Is this desirable? Is it desirable use for the land? Is this variance minor? We need to hear from you. We need to hear from you your rationale for why we should be approving this, because those are the tests that we have to use in assessing your application.
Yes, the use is minor because we're not changing the use. The land is zoned as commercial use. It also allows for restaurants to operate in this on this property. It is minor because we are simply adding an additional use to it and not changing the zoning or use of the lot. The lot is still used for parking. We are simply adding an additional use, which will not take up more than 6 parking spaces.
Any questions from the panel on this application?
Chair, for the planner, I think we were struggling in our discussion about how this is a minor variance and not a zoning amendment, because it is not necessarily permitted. I wonder if the planner might be able to elaborate on that a bit.
Yes, Mr. Wildman. So it's not a zoning bylaw amendment requirement because the use is permitted according to the zoning. It's just not permitted to be not enclosed within the existing building. So this is a minor variance case, in my opinion.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
And the takeout restaurant, by the definition, is the restaurant according to section 54 of the zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're not adding a use, in your opinion?
No, we are not adding not permitted use to this zone. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Pula. Anything further, Mr. Wildman? Mr. Wilder?
Thank you. So I noticed that the unit will be close to the street. What happens during peak times in terms of multiple deliveries from 3 different companies, whether it's Uber, whether it's whoever you have picking it up, and do you not foresee an issue with? I mean, yes, people aren't picking it up, but you could have multiple vehicles waiting their turn with their cars running, I guess, or cars parked, I guess, to pick up the food. Is that not an issue?
In our experience in our other lots, we section off several parking spots specifically for these drivers. We also will sometimes have parking attendants that will direct them to areas that will not create traffic or that will not create a disturbance on the site. And we also, this model of business and restoration improves kind of the delivery time structure, in that delivery drivers have a specific time that they need to be on site, and we also have a specific time that we need to make the orders. So by joining these 2 processes and these 2 kind of these infrastructures that are set up within the software, we're able to limit drivers' presence on site to sometimes a maximum of 1 minute or even just 30 seconds. In which the case the meal would be prepared long before they've even made it on site. And this is done kind of like by carefully catering to these recipes and making sure and optimizing them for delivery for this exact purpose, and that food gets to people faster, to consumers faster. There's less traffic on site with delivery drivers, and consumers are able to have food delivered to them nice and warm. As opposed to cold, because they have to wait 30 minutes for their meal.
So exactly how many parking spaces have you leased from this lot? I mean, it's an ongoing business, I guess, that's on this site. Is that right? Well, I don't know, what type of business is it? Do you know, or that you're leasing from?
We are leasing from the property that's on 370 Catherine Street. I think they are a small like nurse CLSC kind of thing.
Right. Okay. So how many spaces? So you say that you're going to have your vehicle on how many spaces exactly?
The vehicle is on 4 of those spaces, and 2 of those will be sectioned off specifically for drivers. We also have, and the property manager is very content and understandable and enjoys and likes this concept of new business. And if we were to require more parking space, to lease more parking spaces to reduce this kind of traffic flow of many delivery drivers on the site, we can do so by improving and amending our lease with the property manager.
I understand. So that you've answered my question. So basically, apart from the spaces that your vehicle will take, you'll have basically 2 parking spaces available for delivery vehicles.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Reef also owns the company Impark, and Impark is the manager of the parking lot. So we can always go back and work with the property manager if they see fit that we need to lease more parking spaces to reduce this.
And if I may ask, on your other 2 locations, how many parking spaces do you actually have for similar delivery vehicles?
The one that we have at 2197 Riverside Drive, we have 1 parking space that is limited there, but we are generating enough sales that we can have enough staff on site that the preparation times of these meals is so low that drivers we don't experience driver times that is so high that we cannot that we create a traffic issue. As well, after 5 p.m., there are no more tenants inside the office building, so that opens up the rest of the parking lot and essentially completely removes the issue of traffic flow, because the rest of the parking lot is available for drivers to park in and not create traffic on the lot.
Yeah, and the other location you mentioned, Riverside Drive. What do you do with the other location?
At 1536 Scott Street, that is that site. The building is not being used by the tenants, so we have an agreement with them that we have our parking space, but because the space is it's in development, and not being used by the tenants, there is no traffic or no normal people or other tenants that are on site actively using the site for parking. So our drivers do not create a traffic issue like you're describing.
All right.
Isn't this the parking lot that also services the Ottawa Police Service hall across the street on Catherine?
I don't think so. No. Every now and then will be police officers that park on site just to take lunch.
You sure about that, huh?
The parking lot is open for public use. There are several people that will park on site and then walk to work.
And you have determined when you're looking at this site that you're not going to be causing problems because this lot is heavily used?
No. Currently the lot is not heavily used. More than half of the lot is currently is actively empty, which is partly why the property owner wishes to have one or more of these takeout restaurants on site, because we also guarantee a source of income for the property owner by leasing these spots at a certain rate for the month.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. McLean, you have a question or comment? Are you done, Mr. Wilder? Okay, Ms. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question to the city planning staff. Again, I am struggling with the use. So as I understand it, a standalone restaurant is not permitted in this GM3 zone.
It's that the restaurant is not permitted, yes, in the building, is not permitted being not enclosed in the building containing the office and or the hotel.
So this specific zone requires a restaurant to be in a building with a hotel and office use.
Yes.
And a standalone restaurant, so as I see, this is a standalone restaurant and it's not permitted in this zone.
If I may, a standalone restaurant is permitted in the GM3 zone, in the GM3 zone.
Well, then why are you here?
To ask for a minor variance to permit the restaurant, given that it is not enclosed within a building with a hotel or office use. It's essentially a trailer.
Yeah, I understand that, but you just told me the GM3 zone permits a standalone restaurant.
Yes.
No, it permits the restaurant like a use. The definition of the zoning bylaw, I don't believe it defines a standalone restaurant or not. It's just the use in the zone. And the GM zone allows restaurants, GM3 also allows, but it requires them to be enclosed within the building.
So what's the intent of the requirement to have it in a building of an office or a hotel building? What's the intent? Why in this specific subzone is there a requirement to have it? Because this is contrary to that requirement.
Yes, I understand. I cannot answer that question because I wasn't writing by law, but.
Okay, that's what I'm struggling with, I think, is the request that's being in front of us, but I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Anything to add, Mr. Lill?
No. That is my presentation, just apart from it being in compliance with and kind of like in the interest of the 15-minute plan and the creating smaller and better communities and having services closer and better employment closer to people within the community.
We're still dealing with the old official plan. The new official plan is not in place yet. It has not been approved by the ministry. All right. I think what we're going to do is reserve on this application because I think we are all struggling with what is permitted and what is not permitted on this site. Given the way the bylaw is written, it seems to be interpretable. Anyhow, we'll reserve on this, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for your presentation. And you will receive our decision within 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Right. Next application that is before us is item 8 on the agenda. 2271 Prince of Wales Drive. It's a minor variance to permit a patio without a 2-meter high barrier screening it from the residential area located to the west. It is proposed to construct an at-grade outdoor patio on the southwest corner of the proposed Starbucks fast food restaurant. And the agent for this application is it Ms. or Miss Johnson?
Mr.
Or Ms.
Mr. Daniel, yeah.
Mr. Johnson. All right. We'll go through the oath of solemn declaration first. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. All right. So I'm wondering, the materials that we received has a site plan that shows where you want to put your patio. Do you have a more detailed site plan of the actual patio, giving dimensions?
I'm not sure what you have, but I think you probably have what we submitted.
Normally speaking, when we deal with these types of patios, we need to know what the dimensions of the patio are.
Okay.
And this is not dimensioned on.
Well, the patio is not shown on this drawing.
Yeah, well, I've got one here that dated August 20th.
Is there another drawing? Yeah.
There we go.
I see. So this shows the proposed patio.
Yeah. What we need to know is the length and width of that patio. How many square meters is it? And what are the dimensions?
Okay, well, I can get you that information very quickly. I thought it would be on here. But it's 3 parking stalls wide. So it's about 24 feet wide by 20 feet. But if you want the exact dimension, I can get that to you.
I appreciate that because we're probably going to put that into our condition if we approve.
Okay, just 1 second, okay?
All right, thank you.
Hi there. So I'll have that for you in a couple of minutes.
All right, if you'd like to make your presentation then, please.
Sure. If you want to pull up the drawings, I'll quickly run through this.
Yep.
So yeah, if you want to go back to the site plan. So yeah, so this site is on Prince of Wales. It was previously a Tim Hortons, and my client, Starbucks Coffee, leased the space and obtained a building permit. And as part of their project, they wanted to include a new patio. So if we go to the next screen, I guess the existing site plan. So just to the, I guess, the south, the site is at the north, or the building's kind of at the north end of the site. Just south of it, those 3 parking stalls. The proposal was to convert those 3 parking stalls into a surface patio. Typical, typical Starbucks patio. It's just on concrete, loose tables, chairs, umbrella, bring some sort of vibrance to the street, and enclose it with a metal rail. And patios permitted. We've got surplus parking, so there is no issue with reducing parking. The variance that we require is a screen that is required when a commercial site or a commercial patio on a commercial site is adjacent to a residential zone. And the residential zone that we are adjacent to is actually across the street. And the purpose of the wood fence is acoustics. So, we don't want to, build a screen in front of the patio because there's visibility issues and other issues. And really the acoustics is really irrelevant, considering the street would provide much more sort of noise for the people in the residences across the street. So that is the application. It's just really not to permit the patio, but to eliminate the requirement for the wood fence or screen up against the residential neighborhood across the street.
All right. Out of curiosity, you're not providing any music on this location?
No.
And what about lighting?
No additional lighting, just whatever's on the building, and there's some existing lighting light posts in the parking lot.
Okay. Any hours of operation of the patio?
The same as the store. It's I don't know if it has been determined, but it's never past 10 p.m. and never before 7 a.m.
So we can say 7 to 10 p.m. Okay. Maximum seating capacity will be how many?
On the patio is 24.
All right.
And I've got the dimensions. Do you need them in imperial or metric? Sorry, imperial or metric, yeah.
This country went metric in 1975.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So
just give it to me in the numbers we need.
Yeah, I was just giving them, sorry, and just let me convert these. I just handed them in imperial. So, but while I'm doing that, if anybody has any questions, I'm glad to answer.
Months of operation. You're just going to operate in good weather?
Yeah, it's good
down for the winter.
Weather permitting. Yeah.
So we're looking what, April to November?
I would say so. Yeah.
I'm asking this because generally speaking, we impose these kinds of conditions when a patio is approved.
Okay, so why don't we say March to November?
March till November. Okay. That's for 24 spaces. And in your determinations, the noise generated by 24 patrons on this patio are not going to impact people on the other side of the Prince of Wales Drive.
Right. Yeah, and not to mention, the patio is, it's not up against the property line. It's recessed on the site as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from the panel on this application? No? Okay. I'll just wait for the dimensions.
Yeah, if so the patio is 5.2 meters by 8 meters.
5.2 by 8.0.
And that's a designated patio area, not the sidewalk that leads to it.
That's all right. So that's okay. So I don't see that there's going to be a excuse me, there's going to be a noise issue. I don't know what the other members of the panel think. That's the reason why we generally ask for a screen to put up. Most of the time, these things are slightly closer to residential uses and not across a major arterial. However, if we approve this, the conditions, I think they can. Anybody else think of any other? I'll just identify the conditions. There'll be no music on the patio. There will be no lights except for what's there now. The hours of operation between 7 and 10 p.m. Maximum seating capacity is 24 persons. Your months of operation are from between March and November. And the dimensions of the patio are 5.2 by 8 meters, whatever that works out to in square meters. Agreeable to those conditions if we approve?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Okay. All right, no questions from the panel on this? All in favor of the application as presented with the conditions applied? All right, good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
And, the next application on the agenda is item number 11. Ottawa Community Housing Corporation, 715 Mickinac Road. And this application was previously adjourned October the 6th and November the 3rd. And in summary of the application, it's a minor variances to permit a reduced number of residential parking spaces, a combined soft and hard landscape parking lot buffer, a reduced building setback above 4 stories, building A, an increased driveway width, a reduced rear yard setback, buildings B and C, to permit parking spaces in the required corner side yard, and a reduced percentage of transparent glazing, buildings A and C. It is also proposed to construct 2 7-story residential buildings along with a 4-story residential building, with each building having at-grade community-focused non-residential space, along with at-grade residential and visitor parking. All right, and the agents for this, I believe, is Ms. Gilchrist. You're there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Okay, Ms. Gilchrist, for the record, your address, please.
Yes, I am a planner with IBI Group, and the address is 650 Dalton Avenue in Kingston, Ontario, K7M 8N7.
Before we begin, we have to undertake the oath or solemn declaration exercise. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So as we all know, this is the 3rd time around on this application. And I think you're well aware of the fact that the local community association is still not happy, although they are happier. So if you'd like to make the presentation, and I guess let's go through the variances and explain what you're requesting on behalf of your client.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the outset here, given that this is a complex project and we have had a lot of consultation with the community association, I'd like your permission to exceed the 5-minute presentation rule in order to address all the comments to date, review the variances, and really to provide the committee with a fulsome planning overview.
5 minutes is going to turn into how many?
Probably 10 to 15.
Do we really need a 15-minute presentation on this?
There's been quite a bit of back and forth on the matter of parking, and to be perfectly direct, I think this all comes down to the parking that we are proposing, and the community association is in opposition to. And it's quite complex. This application is, of course, going through a site plan process as well, and it has a lot of merits that I would like to be able to address.
Okay. And sure. All right. And before you begin, I have one question on behalf of myself and the other members. Was a parking demand study done to determine the impact of a reduction in parking spaces on this site on the neighborhood?
To answer that question through you, Mr. Chair, not a specific parking study itself, but a transportation impact brief was completed through the site plan process that addressed the proposed parking in relation to what is required through zoning, and determined that what is being proposed is sufficient to accommodate the needs for Ottawa community housing on this site.
So you didn't do a parking survey, you didn't do a demand survey in the neighborhood,
No.
existing conditions and the potential for negative externalities as a result of this application being approved.
Respectfully, one was not required through the site plan process, as this particular project is capable of accommodating all parking demand on site, and there was no trigger for a parking study to address off-site existing problems in the neighborhood.
So we're reducing the amount of parking provided by how much, Ms. Gilchrist?
By a total of 19 spaces for the residential component. To be clear, the visitor component that is required by zoning is provided. So the requirement is for a total of 118 residential parking spaces, and we are proposing 99.
Okay, all right, please proceed.
Thank you. I'll start at the beginning. So I'm joined today by colleagues Baron Meyerhofer and Cliff Udale with Ottawa Community Housing, my colleagues at IBI, Allison Chen, and we also have planning staff with us today, of course, Craig, whom you know well, as well as Kimberly Baldwin and Mary Dickinson from the Housing Department. I would ask also that Mary is able to make a few comments after my presentation, specifically with respect to the Housing Department's position on this file. As I noted, there is a site plan application currently with the city, and through that process, as well as this one, we've reviewed every aspect of this project with planning staff and are confident no further variances are required. The site plan, we're coordinating our final submission to address all second circulation comments now, and that will be filed hopefully next week. Again, just to highlight to committee that we do have the full support from planning staff on this project. And again, it's three components. It's committee of adjustment, it's development review, and the housing department as well.
And just to clarify, how far along are we in the site plan review process?
Yes, so we submitted our application earlier this year. It's gone through 2 reviews of technical comments. So we're currently working on our second resubmission.
And how many more do you expect to be?
We're hoping for no further comments once this resubmission is made and staff has had a chance to review. We believe we've addressed all of the comments made to date.
Okay. And if I could hear from staff that the department can confirm this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. It is my understanding that we are in a comfortable spot with the site plan based on the variances that are submitted.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You gave a good overview of the project. I would just like to note that IBI has been working with Ottawa Community Housing for almost 2 years on this project. And from the outset, the mandate has been clear for us. And that is to balance many competing aspects and to prepare a site plan that achieves the best balance of those amenities while maintaining 271 units. So we've done the analysis on this and explored all different variations, forms, layouts for the site plan. And the plan before you is the culmination of all these efforts, and we believe is the best development scenario for this site. And again, the 271 units, it's important because it was chosen at the outset of this project in collaboration with the City, Canada Lands Corporation, and part of the RFP for this community housing initiative. And so OCH is mandated to provide those units, and it's tied to their funding. This high impact social project is what we call this type of development. It's about achieving sustainability goals, experience of the residents, communal amenity areas, high level of landscaping, low impact stormwater design, flexible programming. So in order to balance all these goals, the site plan, as currently shown, requires 7 variances, including the reduction of 118 parking spaces to 99 for the residential component. What that equates to is about a 16% reduction in the residential parking requirement. Right off the top, I'd like to highlight something that I think is really important for us all to take note of. In the community design plan for this area, it's the former CFB Rockcliffe CDP. In affordable housing section 5.8 specifically states that affordable housing will be dispersed throughout the Wateridge Village community, and that Canada Lands will establish partnerships to secure the resources necessary to sustain a range of housing types, and that affordable housing will be facilitated by allowing alternative development standards on a case-by-case basis, such as reduced parking requirements. So not only were alternative development standards anticipated in the CDP for affordable housing projects, reductions to parking were explicitly listed as a way to facilitate partnerships with not-for-profits and to achieve affordable housing goals for the community. The requested variance to reduce residential parking by 19 spaces was anticipated and expected for this property at the outset of the partnership between CLC and the city, as well as OCH. And the layout that you see before you, the buildings frame the street and the parking lot is interior to the site, and it's designed such that the parking is obscured from Michael Stockwell, which runs north-south on the east side of the property with a 3-meter landscape buffer. But it's also designed such that the parking lot itself has less of a visual impact on the residents who will be seeing it from their units. And the reason for that is the bioswales that you see, the 3 bioswales running east-west, as well as the tree planting throughout. The parking lot layout that we've proposed is functional with low impact development measures, including the bioswales, permeable materials, and a combination of hard and soft landscaping, which also includes the 3-meter buffer abutting the street. And we're proposing 6.7-meter wide driveways and aisles. A little bit about OCH. They're an expert at providing affordable housing. They have 15,000 units, 32,000 tenants in the city of Ottawa within their portfolio. So the proposed parking is based on Ottawa Community Housing's experience on other sites that they operate and that have significantly less parking than what zoning requires. So to reiterate a point I made is that the reduction is being requested to the residential parking rate only. And the reason for that is the required number of visitor spaces are provided and will be available for use by users of the non-residential spaces, which under zoning do not require parking because they're under 200 square meters. So although 26 spaces may seem a little bit excessive for visitor space when we're seeking a reduction to the residential spaces, it was intentional, knowing that OCH can control the residential parking through the lease agreements with tenants. However, visitor parking is less predictable, so those spaces remain in compliance with zoning. By providing the required visitor parking, it will have a positive impact on the neighborhood as it accommodates the short-term and commercial parking demand without adding pressure for on-street parking. And again, OCH can control the expectations and arrangements for parking directly with their tenants upon leasing. All leases reference the availability of parking, and OCH is fully in control of the lease agreements. Parking will be at an additional rate, so it's separate from a tenant's rent. It's critical to acknowledge that there are significantly reduced likelihood that the residents of the proposed development will own private vehicles and require on-site parking for this affordable housing development. The future residents of this project have a fundamentally different need for parking and for private vehicle ownership than those of a market rental or for purchase development project. We understand that the community association from them that they have significant concerns about on-street parking pressures in Wateridge Village, and that they are very concerned about this reduction in parking. So although we can't fix an existing condition within the larger neighborhood by this one development, we can be certain that this project will not further contribute to the parking issues that they're experiencing in the neighborhood. Sustainability and low impact development are priorities for OCH over providing parking that they don't functionally require for their tenants. It is priority for OCH to provide a meaningful community experience with as much universally designed amenity space as possible, programming for their residents, and an overarching focus on sustainability. OCH has allocated 2 spaces for a car share program at this point in time. And that is to allow that program to, kick off. OCH has used Virtue Car before and has had really good experience with them. The agreement has not yet been reached about what provider they will use, but they'll continue to explore those options. And if there is interest and uptake, there is no hesitation by OCH to use other residential parking spaces for a car share program. And I would just note that zoning does allow the use of any residential parking space as a car share space. So there's no zoning compliance issue with that. From the correspondence received most recently from Wateridge Village Community Association on Friday, we understand that overall, they're not opposed to 4 of the variances, and that's the additional 2-meter setback on Building A, the rear yard setback of 3 meters on Mickinac, the location of a portion of the parking within the corner side yard on Michael Stokwa, or the reduced glazing on the east facades of A and C facing Michael Stokwa on the east side. But ultimately that they remain in opposition to the reduction in parking rate, the perimeter landscaping being comprised of hard and soft, and the driveway width of 6.7. So I would note that it appears that this incredibly complex and important project for the community and the city at large for 271 affordable housing units is really coming down to a discussion about parking and whether a reduction is appropriate for this project. I would like to take a moment just to run through, I think I've highlighted all the benefits of the site plan and the merits of how it is currently proposed. But if you could go to the next slide, please. I'd like to take a few moments just to address why IBI does not, we've reviewed this parking plan that was provided by WBCA very carefully. And just for note, it was reviewed, by architects, planners, civil engineers. Our entire team was looking at this to see if it was something that would work and to see if, maybe we missed something. And ultimately, we don't feel it meets the project objectives with respect to low impact development, safe navigation, or parking requirements for OCH. The drive aisle width requirement within the parking lot is 6.7 meters wide. No one's disputing that. But it is therefore, best practice to have the driveways the same as the drive aisles, because it provides, proper maneuvering for residents, but also for waste management trucks coming in and out of the site. And there's sufficient landscaping on Michael Stokwa to screen the parking lot from passersby, and the increase of 0.7 meters does not significantly change the streetscape, but it does improve safety. The proposed layout, though of generally the same footprint, does not take into account the visual impact on the outdoor amenity areas that this layout would have, primarily with respect to the lack of landscaping and trees within it. On the latest iteration of our site plan, currently in with the city, We were able to achieve 3 additional parking spaces. That was the latest revision to the minor variance application before the last hearing. And we were able to do that by reducing a total of 39 spaces in width to allow the additional 3 spaces. So we did that. We added 3 spaces, even though we were reluctant to go to a reduced width space. We did that in hopes of adding another 3 spaces. But I would note that further reducing spaces by length is impractical and also highly problematic for future residents, as any space, as per zoning, that is reduced in length must be identified for small car parking only. And so to achieve the 144 spaces that are shown on this layout markup, the proposed layout has a total of 58 small car spaces at 2.4 meters wide by 4.8 meters long. This simply doesn't work functionally in practice. People drive a range of vehicle sizes and can't be limited to small cars. And furthermore, having such small spaces would highly increase the potential for disputes between residents about inevitable vehicle damage with spaces that small. I want to speak a moment about the bioswales because they're critical. The location of bioswales is dependent on appropriate distance from the building foundation faces and optimal location for drainage planes with respect to low impact development stormwater management. As an approved LID best management practice, bioswales are widely used as a stormwater management solution to treat the runoff, which is also capable of storage volume attenuation. So it's two-purpose. Below each proposed bioswale, there's a level of various media which will promote water quality treatment through filtration, settling, absorption, and infiltration at a slow release rate. So this is part of our overall stormwater management plan for this site. It's absolutely integral. The location of the bioswales was chosen specifically due to the design constraints associated with volume required for water storage and drainage, as well as distance to the proposed buildings. And it's critical that the swales be located away from building foundations. Other green spaces on the site were considered for bioswales, but they did not meet the design requirements either. So if bioswales without trees were at the perimeter, the parking lot aisles would have no strategy to mitigate heat island effect, as having a large expanse of asphalt would, and could affect the energy balance of building A and C as they'd have an increased temperature. And I would note the City of Ottawa and CLC have agreed to pursue phased stormwater management demonstration projects for Wateridge Village using low impact development best management practices. And to note here, I want to be clear on the variance for perimeter landscaping on the parking lot. It is achieved the minimum 3 meters. The relief is being sought for using a combination of hard and soft landscaping, so pavers, immediately abutting the parking lot itself. Whereas on our proposed site plan, the soft landscaping is abutting the buildings itself, and the hard landscaping is abutting the parking lot. And the reason for that, the approach, is to provide barrier-free access to the amenity areas and to building entrances from the parking lot, which will accommodate the very functional and anticipated needs of future OCH residents with mobility issues, while balancing the vision for a pedestrian-oriented complex. Last point on this slide is that with all due respect, the proposed layout to achieve an additional 19 spaces while providing 58 functionally unusable spaces, it looks like a strip mall parking lot and does not at all achieve any of the features that OCH is looking for with respect to the community they are building here or low impact design. If we could just go back one slide, I will summarize, and my summary is really framed under the context of the 4 tests, but I will be brief. So the subject site is within the general urban area. and within the area subject to the former CFB Rockcliffe CDP and secondary plan. And the proposed development of 271 affordable housing apartment units with additional community-oriented non-residential floor space on portions of the ground floor of each 3 buildings. It's consistent with the general purpose and intent of the OP, the CDP, and the secondary plan, as it provides affordable housing that is in a compatible built form, well within the height limit of 30 meters, with active frontages on Hemlock and Mickinac roads, and an interior surface parking lot that's been minimized in size and incorporates low impact development design. On the sustainability front, this project is certifying to CAGBC zero carbon building certification. So it will be certified. And in addition to that, it meets most criteria for FIAS Plus, LEED Silver, and WELL standards. They're not certifying to those, and not all criteria are met, but most. The pursuit of sustainability standards and performance criteria like this is commendable and also very consistent with the policy direction for new development. The subject property is zoned general mixed use, subzone 31, with a height limit of 30 meters. So a low and mid-rise apartment building is a permitted use, no dispute there. To reiterate the parking, a total of 144 parking spaces are required for 271 apartment units, and we are providing 125. We are proposing. And the intent of the zoning bylaw provisions around streetscape and building form is to promote good urban design and attractive streetscapes. And the proposed development is consistent with the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw, as low and mid-rise apartment buildings with non-residential uses at grade are permitted and sufficient parking is provided to accommodate the site user's needs. The requested relief to setback and parking lot conditions would result in an orderly and safe development. An efficient site plan layout is achieved with respect to balancing multiple building footprints, landscaped amenity areas, and parking. The requested variances are minor and desirable for the appropriate development of the site, as the intent of the OP policy and zoning is met by the proposed site circulation, building siting through the location of buildings framing the streets, programmed landscaped amenity areas, complying front and side yard setbacks, as well as parking within the interior of the site, utilizing low impact development, and not to mention striving to achieve the city's goals with respect to affordable housing and adding much needed units to communities throughout the city, particularly at this location for this project. So the proposed low and mid-rise apartment buildings are a desirable use for the subject property, as it introduces affordable housing on a property that was identified for this high social impact project through a built form that's compatible with the neighborhood and a layout that's consistent with the principles of good urban design, and which will contribute to the achievement of a complete community. Lastly, I have one further comment, and then I will pass the floor. But I'd like to add that the petition that was provided to the committee on Monday afternoon, I reviewed it closely, and while I very much respect that it is an indication from the Wateridge Village community that they have concerns about, they have existing concerns about parking in their community, the wording was misleading in terms of phrasing to a group of people who already feel like there's a lack of parking in the community. So if a proposed development is somehow presented to be, going to be further contributing to that, or somehow able to fix it with additional parking, arguably the parking lot designed by WVCA it's not better for OCH or for its future residents. Secondly, the discussion of commercial space on the ground floor is really a site plan matter. It's not germane to the variances that are before the committee today. And the site plan markup indicated amenity space within the buildings would be non-residential or commercial, which is incorrect. And I would just lastly note that, the residents of this development also deserve amenities and and places within their new community that are not, commercial for lease or that necessarily serve the broader community. We're doing a combination of both, but it's important, again, just to reiterate that there's a lot of interests being balanced with this project. So through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask that Mary Dickinson have a few moments to speak, and she's joining us from the city's housing department.
This will be brief, but good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Mary Dickinson, and I am a planner, and I work as a housing developer in housing services for the city. As Tess said, Housing Services is working alongside Ottawa Community Housing Corporation on this project because this is an affordable housing project under a funding agreement with involvement and funding support from all three levels of government. A publicly funded project such as this requires us to follow mandated timelines, which if not met can put our funding at risk. And for this reason, Housing Services appreciates that the committee is hearing this application today, as a decision on this is necessary in order for OCH to move forward with the project. Housing Services is supportive of this much needed affordable housing project, and housing staff concur with planning staff that the requested variances are appropriate and reasonable. Thanks.
Ms. Dickinson, before you sign off, who is going to be living in this complex?
So this housing development will all be affordable housing, but it's at mixed affordable levels. So the approximately 40% of the units will be average market rent, and approximately 60% will be below average market rent, and significantly so. So this results in a significant number of the units being attainable to those in deep need of affordability. So those within the 30th income decile and below, which obviously there are different parking requirements and needs for an affordable housing development such as this compared to a market rental unit or market rental building.
Okay, thank you. So that's the subsidized units, 60%. How many of those are deep subsidy?
I might need to turn it over to Ottawa Community Housing to give you the specific details on that. I know they have their rent rolls and whatnot. If you would like to get
it's okay. At least we know we have the split between market and subsidized units is fine.
Well, I just want one clarification on the market rent.
And who are you, sir?
Sorry, I'm Cliff Udale. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Ottawa Community Housing.
Thank you.
Just to offer clarity on that, when we're capped at 100% average market rent, but it's very misleading because true market rents are, if you go to market for a new development, they're at 170% of AMR on average. So 100% of AMR is actually 70% below true market. It's a CMHC term that's very misleading. So all of the rents in that building will be affordable. Some will be more affordable than others, but they, relative to market rents, they're all would be considered affordable.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any questions from the committee before we go to the other presenter? Okay. We have Ms. Thompson on from the Wateridge Village Community Association, and I know they have concerns. Ms. Thompson, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present. I live at 524 Shenway, and I'm representing the Wateridge Village Community Association.
And your profession, you are an architect?
I am an architect who does affordable housing, but that's not why I'm here.
I know, but I just, and for the record, the Community Association's support and or opposition to the variances, let's just go through them very quickly. Which ones do you support? Which ones do you not support?
As stated, we do not support variances A, B, and D.
Okay.
Related to parking.
Okay.
We do support F and which is the corner side yard setback, and we support C, which is the reduced setback. And then for the other two variances, we do support the reduced rear yard setback requirement. I believe that needs to be tied to uses being provided to reflect a community frontage, building frontage street. And while we don't have objections to variance G for the 50% clear glazing, we believe that the design needs to be updated on the other three faces of the building to avoid a minor variance for clear glazing on those faces.
And the proponent is well aware of that, I take it?
Yes, we first made that. We provided that information at the same time as the committee, and we had previously referred to this on two separate occasions. That would be, I guess, at least a month ago.
So I'm have to assume that the planning department is aware of your comments as well.
Yes, they were submitted to them as well, and they have said that there is no issue, but we have a presentation slide to demonstrate why we believe there is, and we have never been given a reason for why there isn't an issue on those spaces.
So as far as your comments to the committee, you're in support of all but variances A, B, and D. So if you'd like to articulate your objection to those three to begin.
Okay, I would just very quickly like to comment on the comments that were made about the design position or our petition being misleading. The document that was referred to, the colored document, the site plan, that is the very document that was provided to us by Ottawa Community Housing. So if there was any misleading, that was in the document that was provided by the applicant to us. That was the issue that caused this hearing to be adjourned last time, that we were provided that very document that is being described as misleading by OCH that we've included in our petition. I think the other thing to note is that it was described that we were misleading about asking Ottawa Community Housing to solve other problems in the neighborhood. We believe that they're going to increase the problems based on the parking rates. And we had also heard from Ottawa Community Housing and have a presentation attesting to that they had promised in discussions 3 to 5 car share spaces, and on the premise of helping to alleviate existing parking, so that because they could be shared by the residents, and then walked that back the following week. So we haven't put anything in our petition that wasn't specifically provided to us by Ottawa Community Housing.
Just out of curiosity, before you begin, what's the parking situation like in your neighborhood right now?
It's very bad. It's the most common complaint. The community has been designed with very narrow streets. They have infrequent laybys where there's parking allowed, and most of the streets are so narrow that parking isn't allowed. In the existing developments, they've almost all have provided one parking space per unit. Some of those, not including a similar development in the core next door. They have also included in those developments where there's only one parking space, there's been a provision for the ownership that has said, you recognize that you are limited to one parking space, and despite that, people have purchased second cars that are on the streets and there's nowhere to put them. We also have an inadequate supply of visitor parking, so that visitors have to travel sometimes 3, 4, 5 blocks to find a spot where they can park their vehicle. When we issued our petition, we also got a very angry note from a neighbor in the community just to the south that it's not just a problem in our neighborhood, but cars from our neighborhood are parking in the adjoining neighborhood quite a distance away because they simply can't find a place to park. It gets even worse in the winter when there's a winter parking ban, which is more than just the regular blanket. It's from December to March 31st that there is no parking on any of the neighboring streets in the winter, whether there is a storm coming or not. And we do have bylaws being called. Cars are trying to move from one visitor parking place to another. And it is certainly the most serious issue in our neighborhood, and is at the moment badly compounded by the terrible public transit that we have, which I've referred to in my, that it's very, very difficult in this location and with the transit that we have available to get places without a car. We're hoping that
your neighborhood has a secondary plan, correct?
Yes, it does. And yes, I had a presentation that could be presented that demonstrates the core of the secondary plan. That perhaps gives me an opportunity. This is the secondary plan. The lot 33 is highlighted in the core of Wateridge Village, and the plan shows how we're surrounded on all sides by empty parkways, empty space, the NRC grounds, which are fenced off, and then an escarpment, and then residential neighborhoods out to Montreal. Our closest bus stop other than for full day service is up at Montreal and Carson's Road, which is a 12 to 14 minute walk away. And while the community was originally designed as a transit-oriented development, it's now been planned with secondary bus service, a local service, rather than having proximity to transit or on a main route.
And I would assume that the transit-oriented development aspect of the secondary plan was one of the reasons why street widths were reduced and on-street parking was substantially less than would have been expected.
The plan certainly has a vision of a community that relies less on cars. And yes, originally, when it was very first thought about, the transit line went right through the middle of the community. That's where the whole idea began, and it's obviously not turned out that way. I'd also like to mention in the community design plan, it was referred by the applicant that it did contemplate the reduction of minimum and maximum parking requirements where practical, but it also says with the exception of visitor or service parking, mid and high-rise buildings should provide for parking underground. All parking for mid and high-rise buildings should incorporate measures to provide appropriate screening. So while it also contemplated reduction in number of spaces where practical, it also expected that in the core, for where you had a development of this density, that there would be underground parking to provide the need. We have understood that Ottawa Community Housing is limited in funding and have accepted the fact that provision wouldn't apply, but we are still hoping that they do the very best they can to provide parking at the levels required.
All right, and to the three variances that your community is still objecting to.
Okay, perhaps if we could go forward two slides. We'll keep going. Okay, I think one more maybe. Even one further. Okay, so this compares you've seen the diagram, our demonstration parking layout with the proposed one. The first variance is in the total number of parking spaces. The requirement is for 0.5 spaces after the first 12 units in each building. So when you deduct those from the total, you end up with a rate of 0.44 parking spaces per unit, which, as noted, we feel will be inadequate. So the first variance is for the number of spaces. The second variance is for the buffering. And what is required is both buffering from the street, which we agree is being provided on the east side, and then also buffering of the parking lot from the neighboring spaces. What currently exists as described is that there's landscaping right across from the building, but then there is a main pathway on all three sides of the buildings and where the amenity spaces are, and there is not a landscaped buffer in that location. So that what we're suggesting is that you have a more attractive site by meeting the buffering requirements from the public space on the ground floor to the parking lot, rather than providing your green space in the middle of the parking lot, where it's buffering the view of one part of the parking lot from another part of the parking lot, instead of surrounding the parking lot and buffering it from the extensive and very attractive amenity spaces on the ground floor. And we had also suggested that the bioswales, which we agree are a great idea, that they could also, we're taking the three landscape strips with bioswales in the middle and suggesting that they be placed around the outskirt of the parking lot as the bylaw requires, rather than in the center where they are not required to that extent. The third variance is a much smaller one, and we've shown on the drawing to the right a 6.0 meter driveway width, which is what the bylaw calls for at the entrance to developments. It's a small difference between the 6.7, so it's obviously one of the lesser variances required, but that I assume that provision was put in place, understanding the requirements for getting in and out of sites. And this, just to the east of this development, there's the veterans housing, and it has all its park space. So the narrower the driveways, the wider the landscape strip, the more that is buffered from the neighboring green spaces of the adjacent building.
Anything further?
Yeah, I'll just talk about the other two variances. Actually, we can stay here for the next one, which is on Mickinac, which on the left is the frontage at the bottom of the page. That is one of the two streets that's designated as building frontage. And with that requirement comes in the secondary plan, a requirement for the majority of the space to be retail type use with clear glazing, over 50% of the area. Through negotiations with Ottawa Community Housing, originally that building frontage had mechanical room, an electrical room, a bike storage room, and a laundry. And we have negotiated with them to include live-work units and some non-residential space in order to comply with the secondary plan requirements. And so we believe that allowing the minor variance for the reduced setback on that side is entirely appropriate, as long as the building is designed to be street facing with the proper uses, but that the minor variance there should be tied to the uses that have been shown on the drawings that you're looking at. The last one, which is illustrated on the next slide, I believe. Sorry, one more. That was just illustrating a recent example in Ottawa where you have the landscape bioswale in exactly the position we proposed. So we took the elevations that had been provided as part of the site plan control submission that looked at meeting the 50% glazing on the other three faces of the building. And when you look at them in, for example, the top one, in the middle one, a big portion of that is in front of mechanical and electrical rooms, and the requirement is not for glazing, but for clear glazing. So we don't think it is appropriate or the intent of the secondary plan and bylaw. This is a zoning bylaw requirement that you count glazing that's in front of a mechanical electrical room. All the red portions show where glazing is being counted in front of intersecting walls or columns that are right at the face of the building, so that once you factor these into account, so you're only putting glazing where glazing makes sense, you're down between 40 and 47% on each of these spaces. So this hasn't been included as a minor variance, and our suggestion would be that the design needs to be revised so that in reality, a minor variance isn't required.
Okay. All right. Anything further, Ms. Thompson?
I guess final comment, and my understanding from speaking to Baron Hauser at Ottawa Community Housing is that the affordability rate we were told would be an average of 80%. So that in the range between 70 and 90%, that may be slightly different from what we've heard here today. So that what we're not looking at is, it was described as, I think, upper or kind of lower middle class. It's working people that rent has gotten so out of control that they can't can't afford to live. So it's not deep poverty. It's people that have jobs that may require them to travel a long distance, that they may have less ability to work from home. And we are concerned not just about the number of cars in the neighborhood, but how people are going to live well without a car in the neighborhood. I tried to live without a car for 5 years in a different neighborhood, and I recognize how hard that is and how much harder it was when I moved to Waterford. So part of it is looking at how can you provide the amenities that people require, the transit, which we have asked for all sorts of help on trying to ensure that full day transit is in place in the neighborhood before this happens, and information has been promised to us that hasn't been received. So we really have tried to look at this from all angles and come up with a solution that works. And so far we haven't been convinced of that. The transportation study that was mentioned as part of the site plan control application, our community association made a whole range of comments on the plan, on the inaccuracies and assumptions that we don't think are warranted. For example, they looked at what the shares of driving, transit, and walking and biking were in the surrounding community, and then it assumed a very different rate. Almost like twice as many people would ride their bikes as they do in all the surrounding areas. And so that created a picture of how transportation would work in this area that we do not believe it is all accurate. It didn't have the right speed limits. There were a whole bunch of things that showed that it didn't accurately reflect what was going on. And we submitted that probably 2-3 months ago. We haven't had any response back.
This was submitted to the city?
To the city, yes.
And this is to the transportation department or the transportation planners?
It went back to the site plan control head. So as part of our general comments.
Okay.
The final thing is that there's been a request not to tie the variances if they're granted to these specific drawings, but to the site plan control approved drawings, which we have some reservations about, partly because the people approving the drawings are also part of the building design. The building team, we've also obviously had difficulties with consultation. After speaking to our counselor, we're suggesting that if this is going to be contemplated, that there be built in a requirement to continue to review the drawings before site plan control approval is granted. And we have spoken to our city councillor, who is also a board member of Ottawa Community Housing, who is willing to help with that role. We've also spoken to Canada Lands Corporation, who haven't been properly consulted on some of the submissions that have been received, and they've also suggested that they would like to be notified as these changes move forward.
As a final question, Ms. Thompson, is the city aware of the parking situation in your neighborhood?
I don't know. We have certainly done our best in multiple submissions to make them aware of that. They've received all the information you have and a number of other submissions as well.
I mean, these problems have been going on for years, correct?
It is a community that's being built up, and it's getting worse over time. So they've been developing in the last 2 years. Our city councillor has certainly been made aware and has been working on a whole series of traffic calming and potential additional parking locations on the roads with us.
You're not aware of the transportation people planning on doing any sort of parking demand studies in the community?
No, we have reached out to a number of people, and we've been told, because it's a community where right now it's very complicated because Canada Lands Corporation owns the land, and then it gets turned over to the city at another point. So the city, it isn't even their property yet. So they put it in the hands of Canada Lands until that time.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you, Ms. Thompson. Mr. Udale, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, just some clarity on a couple of issues. One question that came up at the beginning was, parking studies, and one thing I can tell you on the affordable housing file with the waiting list of 12,000 people, that's on the deeper affordability, plus all the people in between that and market. There's almost an insatiable demand. We're renting up a building currently and renting out units without parking is not a hardship. There's a huge demand for that, and often those are the people in the deepest need. So, you know, from that perspective, we do have control on intake. And I think what's important, we can tell you from an operational standpoint, in the event where we were to add 20 additional spots, we would then be obliged to rent those out to tenants with cars. So those 20, we'd bring 20 more cars in the community, and we wouldn't move the needle whatsoever on the broader community issues related to parking. So there will be no net benefit nor impact of those additional 20 units from our perspective. And we understand the broader issue. And I think, and as Gil referred to the retention of all 26 visitor units, we think that's where you run your risk more so. And then just to expand on the rideshare issue, it was not walking anything back. I just want to be clear there. When we engage, it's a private sector company that does that service, and they need demand to be able to do it. So what we suggested based on our experience is you create a number of spaces, they rent them out, and then based on demand, you have ability to scale it up. So we just wanted to make sure that we didn't misrepresent that on day one, we could put in 5, because no rideshare program would offer that up. But if there was demand and we could turn it to 10 over the next 5 or 10 years, we'd be more than happy to do so. That we're very green in how we orient our development. We've been very progressive with the introduction of rideshare, but we also know that it takes a while to scale it up. So just the clarity there, it's not a walking back. It's more a reflection of how the rideshare program evolves and gets developed. And on the transit issue in the community, I mean, we'll get to the other side of this, I'm sure. And then we look forward to advocating on, with WPCA for Cruise, rider or transit service that community, because we'll be facing similar issues. So we are in full agreement on that file. And we really think that what we proposed here will be a net benefit, I think, to the community as opposed to a draw. So I don't know what that, I'll close.
Thank you, Mr. Udale. Mr. Wilder, you had some comments or questions?
I do have some comments. I guess I'm Ms. Thompson. I've read your briefs. Actually, I've been to the community. I went to see Veterans House. And I drove around the community. I walked it at length. I was quite interested to see how it was developing. I'm very disappointed about the narrow streets. I'm very disappointed with Canada Lands Corporation, period, on the master plan for this community. Clearly, when doing this master plan, the community design plan, I don't think adequate attention was given in terms of the density that was being proposed here, in terms of the demand for parking, and I can appreciate it. It probably will only get worse. As Mr. Udale said, another 19 spaces will be leased to another 19 tenants. Where these tenants would move in any case on the street is, it's highly unlikely that it's going to be any worse for this particular development as for any other new development that's going to be put up here in the remaining blocks. To be honest with you, it really, in my mind, all falls back to the original developer of this master plan, Canada Lands Corporation. And again, this was supposed to be a transit-oriented development community, and I was quite excited about that when this was being developed. And clearly, this is very disappointing because, frankly, I can appreciate, I was there for about an hour or two, and in terms of bus transportation, I was there actually twice, and it is very limited. It is very poor, especially I can imagine on weekends and the like, for people who are having to do grocery shopping and the like. It's obviously very problematic. And, in terms of the nature of this people who are going to be living in this particular development, I would hope that, and I promote, certainly, I really feel positive about ride sharing. I really think that when people become acclimatized to using the ride share concept, that it really will work. And I would hope that would alleviate some issues with regards to needing additional parking spaces for tenants. But overall, 19 spaces, I don't know how that's really going to solve the overall problem. It's not so much for this particular development, but just overall in Waterridge itself. And I don't know whether Canada Lands Corporation is listening in at all on this conversation, but it's really something they should be addressing. Frankly, I think it's a real issue that has to be taken up with our transportation planners sooner than later. And I guess I'm just going to leave it at that. I can appreciate the community's concern with regards to the parking situation, and I realize it. I realize that perhaps the planning, the layout of the subdivision in terms of the street layouts, the narrow streets and the like, it really wasn't well thought out in my mind in terms of the density and in terms of addressing parking and the like. And certainly, as it's supposed to be a transit, where is the transit for this community? And I'm very disappointed that there hasn't been more communication with OC Transpo, with our transportation planners, with Canada Lands Corporation to address this, because the community is well built out now. And in fact, there should be much more availability in terms of availability of transit, considering the distance one has to go to do major shopping and the like. It is quite isolated. So I thank you for your comments, Ms. Thompson. I appreciate you're an architect. We've dealt with you on many applications. And I appreciate some of the suggestions you have made, and I'll take that under advisement. Mr. Chair, I think we should reserve on this application. Thank you.
Yes. Any other members have any comments and or questions? Ms. Gilchrist, would you like to respond to Ms. Thompson's concerns?
Certainly. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I think, my colleague Cliff addressed a number of the comments that I would have also provided a response on, but I would just like to reiterate where we are in the site plan process so that it is known that the community association's comments were provided to us on the last round of technical comments, and the resubmission that we are working on now will include a response to them. What has happened is that through our coordinations with the community association and making some adjustments to the location of the non-residential spaces at grade has required us to do a not so minor mechanical and electrical redesign. So we're working with our team right now to make those changes and submit a fulsome site plan response that will address all comments to date. So I just want to reassure the committee that through the site plan process, a response will be provided to all comments received to date and dealt with. There was one other item with respect to the glazing on the ground floors of all three buildings. The secondary plan is really speaking to Hemlock and Mikinak for active street frontages. So that's the two streets east-west on the north and south ends of the property. And so that's where the efforts have been focused to include these community-oriented spaces with glazing and to create the animation and activity on those streetscapes that the plan is speaking to. So in terms of the zoning requirement, the zoning provision is that where non-residential uses are located on the first story of a building, the area of the wall of the first story facing the street must have a minimum of 50% of the facade consisting of transparent glazing. Sorry, I say that with a smile because I'm not sure that could be worded any more complicated to say that on the ground floor facing a street, you must have at least half of the frontage as glass, as transparent glass. So we have every confidence that our site plan, our building design as it is now will achieve that minimum. So there's no question from our perspective about zoning compliance or any further relief. Now you will note there is a variance before you today on the east facade of buildings A and C facing Michael Stokwa. Those are the two short ends of the building on the east side that do not meet that minimum because they are residential units on the ends of the buildings. So But with respect to the other buildings, it will, or the other facades, it will be met. And I would just like to note from a zoning perspective, there's no requirement for what use is behind that wall. So we're making best efforts to make sure that it lines up with the non-residential spaces to achieve the overall goal of having animation. But I would also like to note that OCH is not a typical developer in the sense of, you know, mixed use for-profit commercial leasing. It's not within their operation model to be a landlord to a Starbucks. It's really not part of the mandate of this project. So it needs to be viewed a little bit differently than other for-profit applications. And I see Kim with her hand up, but there was one other item I just wanted to address in terms of the zoning with respect to the perimeter landscape requirement. So the landscape requirement for a parking lot of over 100 cars is to have a 3-meter landscape buffer. And the landscape buffer definition in the zoning bylaw requires the way it's worded is that soft landscape buffer has the same corresponding meaning, such that the expectation is that the full perimeter of the parking lot have a soft landscape buffer. But we know in practice that that is not pedestrian friendly, it is not barrier free, and it does not provide a functional layout. So what is being proposed is not a reduction in the 3-meter landscape requirement. It's just to allow hard landscaping, so pavers, beside the parking lot and pushing that soft landscaping closer to the buildings where it can provide a better screening, knowing that we have sufficient landscaping within the parking lot to break up those hard surfaces and achieve the low impact development. So I just wanted to clarify that on the landscaping and the glazing zoning compliance items. But I don't have anything further to add if Kim wants to speak to the zoning.
Thank you, Ms. Gilchrist. Ms. Baldwin, briefly.
Hi, through the chair. Yes, I just wanted to briefly speak to the context in response to Mr. Wilder's comments. Given my experience as development review planner, the site next door, 681 Mikinak, was recently approved and is currently under development. And that mixed use development will add services directly to the community. So just wanted to add that as kind of a context information for the panel's benefit. That's all, thanks.
All right. Thank you. Questions, comments on the presentations? No, all right. I think what we're going to do, thank you very much, by the way, for your for everyone's input. It's been very informative on a complex issue. I think what we're going to do is we're going to reserve on this application and you'll receive our decision within 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe that concludes today's proceedings. We have gone through all the applications. This hearing of the Committee of Adjustment is now concluded, and we'll see you, ladies and gentlemen, at the next part of this hearing, which is